Okay, so welcome to you guys. I'll officially welcome you guys. Welcome to our course. So there's a lot of things for you guys to learn over the next 5 days, helping you guys to develop a foundation in the path to enlightenment. But what we're going to do is start out with some meditation just to get you guys started. Have you been here before when I've done meditation? Okay, so both of you guys have been here, so you guys know about the chanting and all of that stuff. So I'll start with the chanting. Then I'll do some guidance. There'll be a period of time of quietness. Then we'll come out of that with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll start today's class. I'm going to introduce you to the course. Then I'm going to teach you about the life story of the Buddha. We'll take a little break. Then I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment so you guys can understand what this mental state is. And then if you guys would like to learn the chanting, I teach the chanting as well as part of today's class. So feel free to join in for the meditation. I'll start off with the chanting and then I'll come back in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Otang Mahakewanang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakewata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Savakasangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sankho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to anyone who's joining online as well. What I'm going to do here is introduce you to the course so that you understand what it is that I'm going to be sharing over the next 5 days. And then we're going to move into our first talk, which is helping you to understand the life story of the Buddha. And then I'm going to help you to understand what is enlightenment. And then if you guys would like to learn Buddhist chanting, I'll teach you guys Buddhist chanting as well. So our course starts each day at 9 o'clock. And then we typically finish up around 3, but with a small class like this, we might end up finishing up earlier, depending on how things go. But you'll see that this is kind of the general hours of when I actually am teaching. The contact information for me is here. You'll see it on the website. I usually share contact information for myself when students are first starting to learn, because nobody's going to get to enlightenment in 5 days. You're going to need help beyond this course. So I share this with you guys so that you guys are welcome to contact me during this course or after the course. If you're coming to class and you're going to be here, great. I'll share the teachings with you. I'll help you to learn. But if you're not coming to class, it's okay. You don't need to send me a message or let me know you're not coming, because obviously I don't take attendance or anything like that. But you guys are welcome to contact me at any time for guidance and help along the path. And you'll find this information on our website as well. In terms of the kind of way that our course is structured each day is we'll start at 9 a.m. with chanting and meditation like we just did. And then around 9:30, I'll kind of switch over to sharing the teachings of the Buddha with you guys. Some people call this a Dhamma talk because the word Dhamma means teachings. It's a talk about the teachings. The way that I think about it is it's a discussion. So it's not a sermon. It's not a lecture. It's none of those kinds of things. It's a discussion where I'm sharing some content with you guys. You guys are thinking about that. You're asking questions, getting help and clarification. And then that way you can gradually learn the teachings. In the middle of the morning, I usually take a break somewhere around 10:30 to 11. I usually take a break in there sometime, give you guys a chance to take a nice little break. And then we take a lunch break around 12. Usually we take an hour and a half lunch break. Each time we go to lunch, I'll let you guys know, when would be a good time to come back in terms of when I'm going to start teaching next, because I normally start teaching around 1:30, where I'll start teaching about meditation. We'll do meditation in the afternoon, but I'll also be teaching it as well. And then we usually finish up around 3. All of this builds for 4 days, where on the 5th day, I invite students out to a tour of the temples, because learning the teachings of the Buddha is really wonderful, and it's going to help you to grow and develop as an individual, but you're going to need continuous ongoing support, and learning how to visit a temple and enjoy that and experience that can be a really rewarding and fun thing. But if you don't understand the symbolism, the architecture, and the artwork of a temple, it can be a little bit daunting to visit a temple, or it can just be like, oh, wow, that's beautiful, and you take a nice little picture. But if you understand the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism of a temple, the temple walls kind of speak to you, so that when you go in, it's kind of like a living library. So I'm going to do on Friday, I'm going to walk students around the temple, and I'm going to show them the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism through the temple construction, helping you guys to understand the teachings of the Buddha that way. It's kind of like a classroom without walls, where I walk around and help students to be able to understand about the temple's construction. So we'll talk about this more on Thursday, so you guys can understand what it's all about and how this is happening. And then you guys would like to join, you're more than welcome to. The course that I'm teaching here, it actually is based on this first book. You can download this for free from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. I'm going to be teaching all these chapters, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19. So it's helpful to have this book, because there's certain things that are in the book that aren't in the course, and there's certain things that are in the course that aren't in the book. So the combination of reading and attending the course will help you guys to fully understand a foundation in the path to enlightenment. These are the topics that I'm going to be teaching as part of our course. I'm going to be starting out this morning talking about the life story of the Buddha, because if you're going to build a foundation in the path to enlightenment as he taught it, it's kind of nice to know a bit about his life. Then I'm going to be teaching you about what is enlightenment. This is a mental state that the Buddha attained, and then he taught others how to attain the same mental state. Tomorrow, I'm going to be teaching the Four Noble Truths, which is the very first teaching of the Buddha. This is where you can have a real breakthrough to understanding what is the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. In 4 simple statements, you can understand what's causing things like anger, sadness, frustration in others, so that then you can actually eliminate it as part of the path to enlightenment. And as part of that, I'm going to be teaching the entire Eightfold Path. This is the path to enlightenment. It's 8 individual factors that you're learning and kind of dialing into your life more and more closely. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha. I'm going to be using his original words to walk you guys through this, to help you be able to see how to train your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. Then I'm going to teach you on Wednesday morning, transforming the 3 poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance. The Four Noble Truths gives you like a little window into the unenlightened mind and what's being experienced. But the 3 poisons really broaden that and deepen it, helping you to more fully understand what the Buddha discovered about the mind and how to actually solve this. So I'm going to teach you that on Wednesday morning. Then there's the 5 precepts. This is a householder's guide to daily practice. This is helping you to understand 5 impactful decisions that you could make either wisely or unwisely, and it's either going to produce wholesome results for you or unwholesome results for you. If you've ever heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, this isn't actually from the Buddha. He never taught that. That sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. I'm going to be using his original words to help you see what he actually taught on this important topic. And then I'm going to be applying it to your day-to-day life and showing you how to implement it through the decision-making that you're confronted with each day. So you're going to see that as part of the course. Then I'm going to teach you what is Karma and how does it affect me. This is a natural law that is affecting you at all times, whether you're aware of it or not. This isn't anything mystical or magical. I'm actually going to demystify it for you so you can see what it actually is. all the teachings of the Buddha in one way or another are coming back to this natural law. But on Thursday, I'm going to go in and I'm going to teach you 4 types of karma and how to ultimately extinguish all your unwholesome karma. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer experiencing any unwholesome karma. I'm then going to teach you what is merit and how to receive continued support on the path to enlightenment. In terms of meditation, I'm going to be teaching you breathing mindfulness meditation, helping you build up that practice, because that's the primary form of training that the Buddha used in terms of meditation. So you really need to build that up. And then we'll talk about the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions, helping you guys to learn these. So you're kind of creating this tool belt for yourself, and you can use these different tools at different times. And then you'll have the opportunity to learn and practice Buddhist chanting, which today we use this as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Then, at the very end, I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. Because if we spend 5 days together and you guys learn a lot, okay, great. It's been wonderful spending time with you. But where you really get the benefit of a 5-day course like this is by integrating the teachings into your day-to-day life. That's where the real improvement is going to happen. So I'm going to teach you guys how to do that. So any questions on what it is I'm going to be sharing with you guys over the period of time of this course? No questions? Okay, let me just check in online here for anybody who might be joining us online. Oops. Okay. There's no questions online either. All right. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to move to this very first topic of helping you to understand the life story of the Buddha. This is chapter 19 of this book, and it's titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where I share a bit about the life story of the Buddha. Sometimes students ask me, why didn't I put the life story of the Buddha at the very beginning of the book? Well, if you learn the teachings of the Buddha, there was a period of time where he shared if you were interested in respecting him and honoring him as a teacher, the very best thing you could ever do is actually practice his teachings. That was the way to honor and respect a teacher. So I know that the Buddha would be more interested in you learning and practicing his teachings more so than necessarily learning about his life story. So with this first book, the first volume of the book series, I spent the whole first part of the book sharing the actual teachings of the Buddha. And it's not until chapter 19 that I actually get into a little bit of the life story of the Buddha. But in a course like this, I usually share his life story right up front so you'll understand a bit about his journey, because his journey to enlightenment is actually going to help you too to be able to understand how to get to enlightenment. So I referred to this as the difficult human existence of sickness, aging, and death, because in the unenlightened state, life can seem very difficult. It can be very hard, especially when you're experiencing sickness, aging, or death, or the people around you, like your parents or your siblings or your life partner, your children. If they're experiencing sickness, aging, and death, it can be really hard for you. These are actually motivating factors that actually motivated the Buddha to actually get to enlightenment. And by the time you get to enlightenment, these things are no longer difficult for you. Life is not difficult. It's difficult in the unenlightened state, but it's not difficult when the mind is actually enlightened. So I'm going to share this with you to help you understand his teachings and his life story. So I've organized this into these different sections of his birth, his early life, his journey to enlightenment, and in his teaching career. And then we're going to ultimately circle back and talk about sickness, aging, and death. Now, normally what I do when I'm teaching is I teach for like 15, 20 minutes, and I pause and open up for questions, teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions. But with this topic, it's usually best if I just teach it all the way through, and then I open up for questions at the end. So I'll help you guys to understand his story. So this individual who we refer to as the Buddha, he started out as a prince destined to be a king. He was the firstborn son of a king and a queen. And when he was born into the world, he was born in 563 BCE in a place that we refer to as Nepal. That line between India and Nepal didn't exist 2,500 years ago. And when he was born Siddhartha Gotama. That was his name. And his mother, being the queen, when she was pregnant and with the king, during this time frame, if you were going to deliver your baby, they would actually take you back to your homeland so that you could deliver your baby with your parents and your siblings and your family. So the king organized a caravan to take his wife back to her homeland where she was born so that she could actually deliver the baby. And in this journey on her way back to her homeland, she ends up going into labor pains. And they stop the caravan. That she gets out, goes over to a tree, and she's holding on to the branch of a tree, trying to deliver the baby because it's having a hard time coming out of the birthing canal. So she's holding on to this tree, trying to deliver the baby. Well, eventually the baby comes through and breaks through the side of the stomach. And because of this, she dies 7 days later. Where today we would have just done a C-section and everything would have been fine. Where 2,500 years ago, they didn't have that technology. So she ends up dying 7 days after his birth, which wasn't necessarily uncommon. There were times where people would frequently die as part of childbirth, and sometimes even the child would die as well. Where today we have much better technology and we understand this process and we don't experience as much death related to childbirth. So because this wasn't very uncommon and it could typically happen, I think something like 30 or 40% of all births ended in the death of either the child or the mother back then. That's because this was somewhat common. They actually had protocols in place that if you had siblings, they would adopt your child as their own child. So if you died as a woman in childbirth and your children lived, your siblings would adopt your children as their own. So his mother had an older sister who adopted Siddhartha Gotama as her own child. So his aunt became his mother, right? So now he grows up in the palace, but when he was first born, his father was interested to understand what his son was going to become. So his father summoned these advisors to come and let him know what his son was going to become. And at the time of his birth, there was a miracle that is said to have been experienced, but I don't think it's actually true. It's said that when he was born, he walked 7 steps, lotus flowers were blossoming under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This will be my last birth." I think this is an embellishment of the story because the individual that lives like a Buddha, that when they live, oftentimes as their life story is being passed down from person to person to person, that people embellish the story because they want to make him look even better than he already was. We don't need to embellish the story of a Buddha. He's already done amazing things, but I think that's what they did, is that I think they kind of elaborated on the story in order to make him look even better than he already was. Because if that part of the story is true, this next part wouldn't be needed, that your father wouldn't need to summon advisors to let you know what your son was going to become. Because if your son comes out of the womb and he's walking, lotus flowers are blossoming under his feet, he's talking, you don't need to know what this son's going to become. You know that this person's pretty special. But nonetheless, this is the story that you'll see in the original source teachings, so that's why I share it with you. But I don't think it's probably an embellishment of the story. But nonetheless, the father does summon advisors and fortune tellers to let him know what his son was going to become. And 108 advisors come. 107 of them tell his father that his son is going to be a great monarch, a great ruler. He was going to rule over his kingdom and expand his kingdom far and wide. And of course, his father's like, yeah, that's my boy. Okay, I'm going to expand my kingdom. Well, there's this last advisor, the 108th advisor comes in, and he apologizes to the king. And he lets the king know that those other fortune tellers were actually accurate in that his son was going to be a leader. He was going to be a great leader, but he was not going to be a monarch. He was going to be a spiritual leader. And his father didn't like this. So his father decides, just in case this advisor is accurate, he was going to sequester him into the palace and keep him in the palace his entire life. He wasn't going to let him go outside and get involved in worldly affairs where he would be interested in being a spiritual leader. So he ends up keeping him in the palace for 29 years, the first 29 years of his life. And he kind of lavishes him with all kinds of things that you can imagine that a rich royal father could do. He was trying to get him hooked to this lifestyle of being a monarch and a king, that he gave him wonderful fabrics to wear as clothing. He gave him great entertainment, amazing food, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him as a child. He gave him everything that the father could give him, rich, royal things that the father could give him. And after 29 years of living this life of luxury, Siddhartha Gautama realized that he was about to become the king, because during this time frame, you would become the king at the age of 30. And your father would retire, and then they would be alongside of you in order to be able to help you learn how to be a king. So at the age of 29, realizing he was about to become the king, he realized he'd never even been outside in the kingdom. And he felt, how can I rule over these people if I've never even been outside in the kingdom? So without his father knowing and against his wishes, he decides to go outside into the kingdom. And he takes with him his royal attendant. This is like his chief of staff, his main confidant. And he goes outside into the kingdom, and he has what's called the 4 observations. He sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and he sees a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to be able to seek a better understanding of life. And he needs to ask his royal attendant what these things are, because he doesn't understand, because he's never been outside in the palace, outside in the kingdom. So he sees this sickly person, and he sees this disgruntledness and this frustration around this person. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? He's like, oh, that guy's sick, and his family is not going to be able to get the basic necessities to sustain life because he can't work and he can't do the things that he normally does, and they're going to really struggle. And this was very impactful to him, because if you grew up for 29 years as a rich royal monarch in the royal palace, you might think that everybody grew up this way. So when he saw these people struggling to be able to attain the basic resources to sustain their life, it was very impactful to him. And then he sees an aging person, kind of a person who's having difficulties walking and kind of older and decrepit. And the same story, there was disgruntledness and frustration around this person. And his royal attendant informed him that this is what is experienced as you age, that you're not going to be able to work and you're not going to be able to take care of yourself. And he saw this frustration around this person. Then he saw a dead corpse, and he saw this grief and sorrow and sadness around the dead corpse. And he needed to ask his royal attendant about this too. And his royal attendant explained to him essentially the same thing, that this family was going to have a difficult time sustaining their life. So these sickness, aging, and death has a real impact on Siddhartha Gautama. He starts to look at the world as being full of misery and despair. And then he ultimately sees this roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to be able to seek a better understanding of life. This person's kind of off meditating, and he needs to ask his royal attendant, what's that person doing? He said, oh, that person, they're trying to figure out this sickness, aging, and death, and why we keep experiencing this over and over and over again, and why it's so difficult for us during these periods of time. So Siddhartha Gautama decided that's what he would like to do. He would not be interested in being a royal. He wasn't interested in being a king and ruling over this misery and despair. He looked at the kingdom as being misery and despair, and he wasn't interested in ruling over that. So when he goes back to the palace, he had decided that he was going to leave from the royal palace and go on this life of trying to figure out how to get to enlightenment. At the time he was married, he had a wife and a young child, and they were sleeping. So he kind of looks in on them, and then he decides to leave in the middle of the night without telling them. He didn't understand his mind as much as he would by the time he actually got to enlightenment, but he understood it enough that he felt like if he woke up his child and his wife, that he wouldn't be able to leave, that it would be too hard for him to leave and go on this journey to be able to figure out how to get to enlightenment. So he just leaves in the middle of the night, and he takes with him his royal attendant and his favorite horse. And as he leaves out of the royal palace, he eventually gets to a point where he lets go his horse. He tells his royal attendant he can leave, and he cuts off his hair. At this time, he has this long, beautiful, flowing hair, because this is how they could tell that you were a member of the royal family, that if you went out into the kingdom and you had this long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew that you were a member of the royal family, because people who were working in fields and labor jobs and things like this, they wouldn't be able to maintain this long, beautiful, flowing hair because it would get knotted up, it would get tangled. But the royal family, they had servants to be able to comb their hair, brush their hair, shampoo their hair, detangle their hair. They had the time to sit around and take care of it, and they weren't doing laborious work. So they knew that you were a member of the royal family if you had this long, beautiful, flowing hair. So cutting off his hair was like, I'm never going back, because nobody would ever think that he was the actual king. At 29 years old, he'd been growing this hair for 29 years. And now since he cut off his hair, if he tried to assume the throne as a king, nobody would ever think that he was the actual king because he didn't have this hair. So there's other things that this does for you that you learn as part of the path to enlightenment. And that's the reason why some people still cut their hair today. But nonetheless, he goes on this journey to be able to understand sickness, aging, and death, trying to understand how to get to enlightenment. And he takes up training with 2 individual teachers because he doesn't know how to get to enlightenment. And these teachers were claiming that they actually understood how to get to enlightenment. So he takes up training with the first teacher. And the first teacher is teaching him to hang himself upside down from trees, lay on beds of nails, pierce his body with metal implements, starve himself. The thought was that if you could cause pain to the physical body and your mind could overcome that pain, that you would then get to enlightenment. So Siddhartha Gotama does this for an entire year. And this teacher is teaching him all these different things. And he comes to the Siddhartha Gotama at the end of this year, and he says that he's mastered his teachings. He says, there's nothing else for me to teach you, that you've learned everything that I have to share. And Siddhartha Gotama realized at that time that his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the royal palace, that this training that he had been doing for an entire year didn't actually work to get to enlightenment because his mind was still frustrated. He was still angry. He was still irritated and annoyed. So he realized he hasn't gotten to enlightenment, and he decides to go study with this other teacher. And this other teacher was essentially teaching him the same things. And at the end of this year, this teacher tells him that he's mastered his teachings. And Siddhartha Gotama realized that his mind was still unenlightened, that he hadn't gotten to enlightenment because he wasn't experienced the peace and the joy of the enlightened mental state. So after 2 years of studying with these 2 teachers, he decides to go off on his own. He's frustrated and feels like he's wasted his time. And he goes off into the jungle, in the forest, and decides to start training his own mind. But the only things that he knows how to do are the things that those teachers were teaching him. So he was continuing to do those things. He took this so far that he was actually eating 1 grain of rice per day. That's how he was sustaining himself. He was on the edge of the forest, meditating and trying to train his mind because he knew a little bit about meditation. And he was basically skin and bones. He was on death's doorstep. And there was this mother and a young daughter that comes by, and they see that he's about to die. And they come to him and they beg and plead with him to eat some rice. And they offer him this bowl of rice. And they ask him to please eat this rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice, and he starts to eat the rice. And what he realizes in this moment is something that we now refer to as the middle way. He has a realization that he realizes that when he was in the palace, he had everything and anything you could imagine. He had the royal riches, he had all the entertainment, the food, everything. And then when he left from the royal palace, he swung all the way to the other side where he was eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he realizes none of these 2 extremes actually lead to enlightenment, but instead it's the middle way where you do things in moderation. And the Eightfold Path is the middle way. That's the path to enlightenment. So he starts to have this realization that he needed to train his mind, because if he let the physical body die, then he wouldn't actually be able to train his mind. So he starts to eat in moderation, and he starts to really accelerate his practice. Over the next 4 years, he actually figures out how to get to enlightenment. So he gets to enlightenment at the age of 35. And from that point forward, he understood that his mind was enlightened because it was completely peaceful and joyful. He wasn't experiencing any anger, sadness, frustration, or any of these other feelings. But he wasn't quite sure if the world was ready to understand his teachings, because he had figured out how to get to enlightenment by himself, and he knew that his teachings were vastly different than what anybody else was sharing at the time. Because they were hanging themselves upside down from trees. They were laying on beds of nails and causing all this pain to the physical body. All of his teachings was about training the mind. So he hangs out at this tree in northeast India for 7 weeks, contemplating whether or not he should actually share his teachings with others. So after the 7 weeks, he decides he's going to share his teachings with others. And he travels back to where he first was studying with those first 2 teachers. He encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he encounters these people, they start to laugh at him. They start joking him and mocking him. Now, in the unenlightened state, you'd probably be upset and frustrated if people started joking and mocking you. But the Buddha wasn't affected by that, because by the time you train your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. You're not affected by those kinds of things. The reason why they were joking and mocking him is they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. They saw him walking towards them, and he looked so bright. He looked so radiant. He looked so healthy. He had meat on his bones, and they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. Because to them, in order to get to enlightenment, you had to be starving yourself. You had to be disparaging the physical body. So when they saw this bright, radiant, cheerful, healthy-looking individual coming towards them, they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. So they start joking him and mocking him and laughing at him. So he walks over to where they're at. He sits down on the ground, and he takes his hand and he touches the earth. And he performs the one and only miracle that he ever performed. When he touches the earth, the animals come to where he's at. So there's deer and squirrel and rabbits and birds and lizards and snakes, and all these animals rush to where he's at. And these 5 people could see, wow, this person just performed this miracle. Maybe we should listen to what he has to say. So they sat down and they listened to what he had to say. And he delivers his very first teaching. It's called the 4 Noble Truths. In 4 simple statements, he was able to explain the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward of how to completely fix the mind. And because a Buddha's teachings are independently verifiable, they could see through what he taught that his teachings were true. And they were able to verify that he had actually gotten to enlightenment. You guys will be able to see this tomorrow. When I teach it, you'll be able to independently verify the teachings, that it's actually true. And you can see what's actually causing your discontent feelings. So these 5 people ended up becoming his very first students. And now from that point forward, he just kept teaching, and more people were coming to learn with him. And his community of students grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And countless people get to enlightenment during his lifetime. He ends up dying at the age of 80, and he dies of old age. And from that point forward, they started to document his teachings to be able to make sure that other people could get access to his teachings after he's dead, so that more people could get to enlightenment. So these are the 3 criteria of what make a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. They will then preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So this individual, who we refer to as the Buddha, he meets these 3 primary criteria. There's other criteria as well, but these are the 3 main criteria. So we know that he was an actual Buddha. So this is his life story and kind of how he got to be known as the Buddha. And he shared these teachings of how to train the mind. Oftentimes you'll see rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer associated with his teachings. He never taught any of those kinds of things. It was all about doing this inner work, this inner growth, this inner development, becoming a better and better human being. That's what he's teaching you how to do. And then during this time of sickness, aging, and death, while this was the motivators that actually motivated him to go on this journey to get to enlightenment, it's actually he understood why people experience such difficulties and struggles during this period of time, because the mind craves permanence. If you crave permanent health and you want this body to be permanently healthy, when you experience sickness, you won't like that. You will be frustrated or annoyed. Or if you crave permanent youthfulness, thinking that this body should always be youthful, as you're aging and you're getting wrinkles and gray hair, and you're starting to lose your hair and things like this, you'll be frustrated and annoyed. You'll be angry about that. or when you get close to death. It'll be very painful for you because you're craving permanent life. He realized that it was craving, desire, attachment, this craving for permanence that is causing the mind to be disgruntled and angry and frustrated and annoyed and agitated and all these other discontent feelings. So he figured out how to transcend that to get to the point where the mind can understand that this is normal, that it's the normal aspect of life, that the world around us is constantly changing and it is impermanent. So I'm going to stop here and see if you guys have any questions. Anything you guys would like to ask about his life story? Oh, you thought he ate mushrooms. No. I'm sure he ate mushrooms at some point, but they weren't psychedelic mushrooms the way that people think today. There's a lot of people who misunderstand, thinking that psychedelics are part of the path to enlightenment, and that's just not true. Yeah. 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 You can't get to enlightenment by taking substances. Mm, 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 mm. Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, when the mind is experiencing that psychedelic experience, it's dependent on that substance for that. Where what you're looking to do is cultivate the mind naturally so that you can experience that all the time. Because that's what's called a conditioned experience, and it's temporary. What you're looking to do is get to a permanent state where the mind is permanently in that state. Mhm. Good. Excellent. Yeah, you don't need those mushrooms. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'll teach you how to do it without all that stuff. Yeah. Okay. So just to kind of end all of this, I'll share this last quote with you guys, that no one ever said life would be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough. Learning Gautama Buddha's teachings is not easy, but learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha will ensure that life is not tough. Because when you're in the unenlightened state and you lack wisdom about how the world works, it can feel really difficult. It can feel really hard. Learning and practicing these teachings, it's not easy. This is a multi-year journey to be able to get to enlightenment. It's not 1 week, 1 month, or even 1 year. It's a multi-year journey. It's not easy, but it's also not difficult. People have made it difficult over the years because they haven't learned and practiced his original teachings. But when you're learning and practicing his original teachings, you'll see that it's pretty straightforward. You'll have plenty of struggles along the way, but you would like to confront those struggles. The Buddha teaches you not to shrink back from the struggle. Instead, walk towards the struggle. Whenever you're struggling in life, this is just because the mind lacks wisdom. There's certain wisdom that the mind doesn't have. And if you run away from that struggle, you're ensuring that it's going to repeat again because you haven't cultivated the needed wisdom to be able to confront that struggle. But if you turn around and you walk towards the struggle and you cultivate wisdom, now whenever you experience that situation, you can actually make wise decisions to overcome that situation. So this journey to enlightenment, it's not easy, but it's also not tough. It's not difficult. Learning and practicing these teachings will ensure that life is not tough, because when you awake to enlightenment, you'll see that life is so easy and so straightforward. Okay? So normally what I do is I take a break right here, but we've actually only been talking for about an hour. And since we're a small class, I could actually probably just keep teaching you, and we could probably finish up our morning session probably in the next 45 minutes or so, if you guys would like to do it that way. Does that work out for you guys? Okay, so the next topic that I teach is what is enlightenment, because helping you guys to understand this mental state of enlightenment will help you to more easily navigate your way to it. If you didn't understand what enlightenment is, you wouldn't actually be able to navigate your way to it. So what I do is I spend some time at the beginning of a program like this helping you guys to understand what this is. But just understand that by the time we get to the end of this conversation, you're not going to fully understand everything there is to know about enlightenment, but you're going to know more about it than you do right now. It's kind of like if I sat here and I spoke to you about chocolate ice cream and you've never tasted chocolate ice cream ever in your life, and I sat here and tried to describe chocolate ice cream to you, you'd understand more about what chocolate ice cream is by the end of our conversation, but you wouldn't fully understand what it is until you actually taste it. So it's the same thing with this enlightened mental state. You're going to know more about what enlightenment is when we're done talking than you do right now, but you're not going to fully understand it until you start experiencing some of the qualities of enlightenment. So I'm going to help you guys to understand this, and you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like as I'm sharing this with you. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind no longer experiences any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. The mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's stable, it's steady, it's unshakable. The mind is relaxed and calm, but yet attentive and alert. Because sometimes when I say relaxed and calm, people think like, so relaxed, so calm. Yes, the mind is relaxed and calm, but it's attentive, it's alert, it's sharp, right? So that's the difference here. So you can actually attain this mental state during your life, or you can attain it at death. But attaining it during your life is wonderful because then you can enjoy the rest of your life in this enlightened mental state. It's a permanent mental state that once you get to this enlightened mental state, your mind will never regress backwards ever again. It's physically impossible for you to experience anger and sadness and all these other discontent feelings. And the way that you do that is you free the mind of something called craving, anger, and ignorance, which is what I'm going to teach on Wednesday morning. You'll learn about what this is. So while enlightenment is a mental state that you're experiencing in this life, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind, where you're purifying the mind of pollutions that are keeping you in the unenlightened state. You're uprooting those and eliminating those out of the mind. Sometimes people refer to enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. While there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state, I don't explain it that way because you understand what happiness is, where maybe if your boss told you were getting a raise, you'd be really happy. Or if you bought a new house, you might be happy. This is called conditional happiness, that based on some condition, you're now going to experience happiness. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditioned happiness, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for the mind to experience the happiness. So while there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state, I tend to not use that. Instead, I use the word joy because it's more of a mental state than it is a feeling. The feeling of happiness arises, it changes, and it fades away. This joy that I'm talking about is just that the mind is always cheerful, bright, glad, and uplifted. It's just always in that mental state. So what oftentimes people are doing is they're experiencing what we refer to as the jhanas. These are preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. In these preliminary phases that the mind goes through, there is this ultimate bliss sometimes and this excitement that is occurring when you're in those jhanas. And people think that they're actually enlightened when they're in the jhanas, but they're not. And so they're describing enlightenment as what they're experiencing, but what they're really experiencing is the jhanas. They're not actually experiencing enlightenment. This is where sometimes you'll hear people tell you that enlightened beings still experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other feelings. But I can assure you that enlightened beings don't experience those things. But if you're in the jhanas, still experiencing anger and frustration, thinking that you're enlightened, you might actually describe enlightenment that way. So because the experience of being in the jhanas is like night and day from when you were off the path to enlightenment until you're in the jhanas, people oftentimes think they're actually enlightened. But these are just preliminary phases that the mind is going through where you're experiencing enhanced qualities of mind prior to getting to the first stage of enlightenment. It's not actually enlightenment itself. So the advantages of getting to enlightenment is that the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You'll notice that the mind's focused. You have concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You won't experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings are completely eliminated from the mind. You'll notice that you can be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all people. Right now, you might find that to be difficult. When you go in certain situations, you might find it difficult to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to people. But by the time you get to enlightenment, that'll be so easy for you to be able to do that. You'll have deep wisdom about the world around you that other people don't actually have, because you would have cultivated your wisdom about the world around you. You'll notice that you're not causing harm to other beings. And because you're not causing harm, harm isn't coming back to you. And you'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming. They're harmonious. You'll get to the point where they're at ease, and all your relationships can be conducted with ease. You'll notice that you can't even be in a bad mood any longer. That is physically impossible for you to experience a bad mood. So these are some of the advantages of getting to enlightenment. In order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to learn these core central teachings. There's other teachings beyond this that you're going to need in order to get to enlightenment, but this is where you start. And these are the things that I'm actually going to be teaching you as part of this course. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. You're going to learn all of those as part of this course. Then I'm going to be referencing the Brahma Viharas. I teach that in other places, in chapter 14 of this first book, and in our Harmony and Relationships course, and our group learning program, I teach that. But in this course, I'm just going to be kind of referencing it. I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters here in a moment, but you're going to need to know those in much more detail than just what I'm sharing in this course. But nonetheless, I'll introduce you to these. Then there's the 7 factors of enlightenment, and you're going to need extensive meditation training in order to get to enlightenment. And when you're learning these teachings, it's important that you don't believe them. You need to learn, examine, and investigate these teachings. You need to reflect on them to verify if they're true or they're false. And then you need to practice these teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life and training your mind through these teachings. So don't ever believe anything. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs and then hoping something good happens when you die. It's about learning, growing, and developing in this life, so that you need to be able to do that through this learning, reflecting, and practicing. And I'll show you how to do this tomorrow when I start introducing you to the very first teachings of the Buddha. So let me just pause here for a second before I go into this. Do you guys have any questions on anything that I've shared so far? You have a question? Okay, so for the people online, because they can't hear you without a mic, that's okay. I didn't mention about the mics, but if you guys would like to use the mics, that'll help. So she asked, like, if you're always joyful, if you're always cheerful, how could you navigate the world and know what your preferences are and what to do in life, right? So the way that you do this is through your wise decision making, where in the unenlightened state, you'll make decisions based in cravings, where you'll chase after things, or you'll make decisions based in emotions and feelings and things like this. And oftentimes that doesn't lead to wise decision making, and it produces unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. But when you get rid of all of that stuff and you just look at what is wise or unwise here? Should I really eat that piece of chocolate cake, or should I maybe have a banana instead? And now you make wise decisions about what you should do or what you shouldn't do, or whether it's your job or occupation or any number of things like this, where in the unenlightened state, you'll be pulled in the direction based on your cravings. So for example, when I first went to college, I took a career and life planning class. And at the end of that, I decided I was interested in being a police officer or a social worker. And then when I saw the salaries at that time, I was like, I'm not interested in doing that. I want money, because I grew up poor and I was interested in money. So I started learning computers, and I went in that direction for a good long while, learning about computers. And then ultimately, when I extinguished that craving, I started experiencing boredom, even though I was in the career and I was making all this money and I had all this assets and all this material wealth. I just got bored and I just didn't like it anymore, because it wasn't motivating to me. Because initially I was motivated to make money. But then once the money was gone, once I made the money, I wasn't interested in doing it anymore. So my mind got pulled in this direction of doing IT and computers because of the money. And that was what was motivating my decision. But when I got rid of that craving and over time training my mind, I got back to what I was initially interested in, which was helping people. That's why I was interested in being a police officer or a social worker. That was the wise decision that I looked inward and I was like, what does this being really interested in doing in this life? Well, I'm interested in helping people. But as long as I had that craving and I was chasing after that, I couldn't do that. So in the unenlightened state, when your mind's polluted, you'll chase after all these different things that is ultimately going to lead to your dissatisfaction. But when you can make decisions in wise decision making, now you can create a life for yourself that you thoroughly enjoy and that you're doing it not based in cravings, but instead you're basing it in wise decisions. And that's what you'll be able to do more and more when you get rid of this pollution. You'll be able to look inward and say, well, what am I really interested in doing in this world? And now you'll actually do those types of things. And that's how you'll base your decisions. Yep. Okay. So now let me introduce you guys to the 10 fetters, because everything the Buddha is teaching you in one way or another is helping you to eliminate these 10 fetters. This is what's actually keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. These are 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered, and all of his teachings are helping you uproot these out of the mind. They're referred to as the fetters because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a person that they were trying to keep confined to a certain area, like a prisoner, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. This was a shackle and a chain and a ball. And then they would keep you in this open field. Today, we put prisoners in jail cells, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they attached a fetter to your ankle. So when he discovered these individual pollutions in the mind, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state, continuing to experience discontentedness over and over and over again. But just like that prisoner, when you release the shackle off the ankle, they're now free, they're liberated. The same thing is true about your mind. When you get rid of these fetters, your mind's free. Because when you're angry or having stress or anxiety or guilt or fear, your mind's not free. It's bound up, right? It's trapped. But when you get rid of these fetters, your mind is free. It's peaceful and joyful. So I'm going to introduce you to each of these, helping you guys to understand a little bit about them and how they're actually eliminated. But then I'm going to focus you on the core central teaching of the Buddha tomorrow, which is the Eightfold Path. This is just a light introduction for you, but in the future, I actually spend an hour to an hour and a half on each one of these, helping you to understand what it is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. So this first one is called personal existence view. This is where your mind is clinging to your body or your mind, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, thinking that this is who you are, clinging to your self-image, clinging to your self-identity. The mind has confusion, thinking that this is who you are, and the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy if you're being perceived that way. So, for example, if you've ever been in a social situation and you spilt something on your clothing and you were embarrassed by that, that's your personal existence view. Clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only feel comfortable if you're being perceived that way. Clean clothes, you're happy. But spaghetti sauce all over your clothes, you're embarrassed, right? You've looked sloppy. And now your mind is thinking, I look sloppy, and you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived. Or maybe you look in the mirror and you see a wrinkle or a pimple or a mole or a gray hair, or you start losing your hair. You might be shaken up by that. That's your personal existence view, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So the Buddha teaches you how to eliminate this out of the mind. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings and the ability of them to attain enlightenment. When you first come to the path to enlightenment, you actually might have doubts in your mind where you doubt whether these teachings actually work or not. And if you do, that's normal. But the way you eliminate your doubt is through investigation and examination of the teachings. You don't eliminate your doubt through blind belief or faith. What you'd like to do is get confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. Because if you have doubt about these things, you won't apply dedication, determination, and diligence to learning and growing and developing on the path. So you need to be able to apply this determination and dedication to growing and developing. But as long as you have this doubt in your mind, you won't do those kinds of things. So you need to get to the point where you have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. And the way that you do that is through investigation and examination of the teachings. That's what's going to help you to see that they're true. Because as you investigate them intellectually, you reflect on them to verify if they're true or false, and then you practice them. And you can see the condition of your mind in your life gradually improving. You'll get to a point where you have no doubt that these teachings are working to improve the condition of your mind in your life. You won't be enlightened at that point, but you will know that they're leading to improvement. And what I encourage you to do is that if you have doubt, just admit it to yourself, because how could you actually have confidence in the teachings of the Buddha if you don't even know what the teachings of the Buddha are? So you most likely have doubt in your mind. So what you do is you just admit that to yourself, and you roll up your sleeves and you sink your teeth in, and you now investigate the teachings. So you can harness this doubt by turning it into an inquisitive mind, where you now become very intrigued to now investigate the teachings, to determine whether they are true or false. So that's how you can harness your doubt and turn it into a positive. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. What this is that in the unenlightened state, you'll have a certain amount of behavior which is unwise, like certain bitterness and harshness and hostility through your speech and your actions. It's kind of like an oil pipe has busted and it's spewing oil all over the world. And as long as you're putting out this unwise moral conduct, you're going to experience it coming back to you. If you're bitter and harsh and hostile to your parents, to your siblings, to your life partner, to your children, to people like this, it's going to all come back to you. So if you're going to get to peace and joy, you're going to need to improve your moral conduct in terms of the way you interact with people. And when you get to the point where you've improved your moral conduct based on the Eightfold Path, you've eliminated this wrong behavior. And now by not putting out unwise moral conduct, you'll see more and more people will treat you with love and respect and kindness and politeness, because that's the way you're treating them. Whereas if you continue to treat people bitter and harsh and hostile, they're going to keep treating you that way too. So you're going to need to improve this about the way that you interact with people. And I'm going to teach you that tomorrow. Then there's wrong observances. What this is where you might think that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer, or things like this is going to somehow lead to beneficial results in your day-to-day life. If you're thinking that rituals and ceremonies are going to improve your day-to-day life, then you're not understanding the underlying problem that the Buddha discovered. The underlying problem that the Buddha discovered is a lack of wisdom in the mind, that the mind just lacks the understanding of these natural laws and how the world truly works. When you're struggling and you're having difficulties in life, that's because the mind lacks wisdom. So there's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you that's going to improve your relationships. There's no amount of strings that I can tie on your wrist that is going to help you in your profession or help you to eliminate sadness or anger or frustration or anything like this. So there's all kinds of rituals and ceremonies that you see in the world that aren't actually going to benefit you. But if you think that they are going to benefit you, then you're not going to be doing the work to cultivate wisdom and improve your decision making. That's what's actually going to improve your life, is by training your mind. So whether you choose to do these rituals and ceremonies or not, that's a choice for you to make. But in order to eliminate this fetter, you need to, at least in your mind, understand that these things aren't going to lead to enlightenment. Because you might actually be going to like a family event and say like everybody's going to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple. And now you're hanging out with everybody. And maybe you're going out to dinner afterwards. And maybe you go to the event and everyone's doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. And maybe you're there with them and just hanging out. But your mind understands these things don't lead to enlightenment. And if those people choose to do that, That's on them. That's their decision. And whether you choose to do it or not, that's your choice. But at least your mind understands this isn't what leads to enlightenment. You've eliminated wrong observances. And oftentimes people have eliminated this before they even come and study with me, because they know that I don't do these things. And that's oftentimes why they come to learn with me, because they're interested in learning the wisdom, not rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this. So this is what wrong observances is. Then there's something called sensual desire. This is what's actually causing your mind to experience all the anger and sadness and frustration and all these other feelings, because your mind has what's called sensual desire, which is where your mind is longing, yearning for agreeable contact through your sense bases. Your sense bases are your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. That's where you experience contact. And the mind is longing, yearning through this for agreeable contact. And when you have agreeable contact, you get happy and excited. You get pleasant feelings. But when you have disagreeable contact, you get painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So for example, let's just say you're at a stoplight and a car pulls up to you with music that you really like, and you listen to this music and it's agreeable to you, and you hear this sound in your ear. You're like, wow, that's my jam. All right, let's party. You're so excited. Yay, this is my favorite song. Oh my gosh. And you get so excited. But now you pull up to another traffic light and somebody else pulls up to you with a different type of music, and you don't listen to that type of music. And now when you hear it, it's disagreeable to you. And now you're frustrated and angry and irritated. That's because of your sensual desire. What the mind will typically do is it'll blame the other person, or it'll blame the music, where in reality it's coming from your sensual desire. You're wanting permanently agreeable contact through your ear, where you live in an impermanent world. You're not going to experience permanently agreeable contact, right? So this is your sensual desire. You can see it with your nose. Let's just say you walked past the flower shop and it was like, oh my gosh, that smell is so amazing. That odor of the flowers, I could just stand here all day long. But now you walk a few more steps and you get a whiff of the sewer. Now you're repulsed by that, right? That's your sensual desire. You're frustrated, you're angry. But this is just an impermanent situation. You don't need to be angry and frustrated. You can just keep walking, right? You don't need to form feelings based on this impermanent situation that is occurring. But that's what your mind's going to do because of its sensual desire. It longs and yearns through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself, wanting permanently agreeable contact. And you can only be happy if you get what you want, okay? When this sensual desire is being fulfilled, you get happy feelings. But when it's not being fulfilled, you get painful feelings. And that's where your ill will can arise, because the mind thinks that those painful feelings are coming from something external. It firmly believes that it's your mom and dad that are making you angry, or your brothers and sisters, or your life partner, or your neighbor, your boss. And when that ill will is arising, this is where you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. So this ill will is damaging your relationships, but it's all coming from sensual desire, that your sensual desire isn't getting met. So now this ill will is arising. So there's ways to eliminate this out of the mind. So do you guys have any questions on these lower fetters? Anything you guys would like to ask? No questions? Okay, let me see if we have anything online here. Okay, I don't see anything online. Okay, so now we'll go to the higher fetters. The higher fetters, I'll talk about 6 and 7 together because they're very similar. This is called desire for form and desire for formless. This is where you have a craving or desire to exist in one of the realms of existence. There's the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, which is the ghost. Then there's the human realm, and there's the heavenly realm. This is all independently verifiable. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You can verify these 5 realms. It's not something that I suggest you do right up front, but ultimately over time, you can verify these realms actually exist. They're in the same time and space as all of us. Well, if you have desire for form, that means you have a craving or desire to exist as an animal or a human being. Those are the realms that have physical form. And that means that you're not content and peaceful in your present existence. Your mind is longing, yearning for something else. I don't know about you guys, but at one point I was interested in being a bird. I was like, man, it'd be so cool to be a bird. I could just fly around. I wouldn't have to wait in traffic. I could look down at people. I could check people out. This would be really cool to just fly around as a bird, right? That was a desire for form because I wasn't content in the present existence. I wanted something else that I didn't have. I was longing, yearning for that, right? Or some people have desire for formless. This is where you have a desire to be in one of the formless realms, like hell. There are people who want to be in hell, very few, but there are some, right? Then there's desire to be in the afflicted spirit realm, which is a ghost. And then there's a large desire from a lot of people to be in the heavenly realm. They think that there's some magical thing that's waiting for them in the heavenly realm, and now they're longing, yearning for that. They're not content in their present existence. They think there's this wonderful, grand experience that's going to happen after this life. But that heavenly realm is not permanent. Right? That's a formless realm, that it's not a permanent existence. Those beings are still in the cycle of rebirth and they're not enlightened yet, and they're going to need to get to enlightenment, right? So if you have a desire to exist in a future existence, then you're not content and peaceful in the present existence. And that's what the Buddha is guiding you to be able to get to. So you need to eliminate this desire for form and desire for formless. And having done so, you'll get to the point where you don't even have a fear of death any longer by the time you get to enlightenment. That if you have a fear of death right now, you can actually eliminate that, where you understand that that's a normal thing. Then there's something called conceit. This is like your arrogance, your pride, your measuring and comparing, putting yourself above people or putting yourself below people, thinking that you're superior to others and looking down on them, or you're putting yourself under people and you feel so inferior that your mind's shaken up around them. Putting yourself below people is just as dangerous as putting yourself above people. Because if you put yourself above people, you'll talk down to them and people will push you aside. They don't like being around you. Because you'll go to a party and you'll be like, so what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm a lawyer. Nice to meet you. It's like, well, I'm a doctor, right? And you're like so conceited and arrogant and prideful, right? And people don't like being around that and they'll just push you aside. But if you put yourself below people, you'll be shaken up. Like you'll go into your boss's office and they'll have a certain project for you and you'll be all shaken up in that situation and they won't have confidence in your ability to perform. And now it's going to affect your career. So by getting rid of your conceit, you can just treat everybody the same. You can treat everybody equally, right? You go outside and you see somebody sweeping the street. You can say, hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Good morning. How are you? You can show respect. You see the king or queen of Thailand walking down the street, which I don't think you will. But if you do, you can say, hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Good morning. You can treat everybody the same. You don't have to figure out in your mind who's what level and who do I treat which way and who do I treat another way. You just treat everybody the same. Where this conceit is coming from is our animal existences. As an animal, we actually needed conceit. We wouldn't have been able to survive without this conceit. So when we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're going to teach us how to hunt and they're going to teach us how to survive as a pack of wolves. Or when we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because she's showing us where the watering holes are. She's showing us where the food is. She's showing us where the migration paths are. If we didn't know who was above us in our elephant herd, we'd just be a roaming elephant in the middle of the jungle, not knowing where to go for anything. So we needed conceit in our animal existences. But when we came into the human realm, our mind doesn't need it anymore. But we're retaining that and we're holding on to it. And it's affecting our relationships. So you can eliminate this out of your mind and you'll actually be more peaceful because you just see yourself as being equal to everybody. You don't see yourself as being above people or below people. Then there's something called restlessness. What restlessness is, where you have an overactive mind, and you might notice that this comes out through your body. If you've ever sat somewhere and you bobbed your knee or you tapped your finger, you tapped a pencil, that's because you have an overactive mind and it's coming out through the body. So when you eliminate your central desire, you'll still have this little underlying kind of like recurring thoughts in your mind. Like if you've ever had a song in your mind that was just repeating over and over and over and over again and you just couldn't get it out of your mind, that's because of the mind's restlessness. So you can eliminate that out of your mind. Then there's something called ignorance. This is the fetter of all fetters. This is the reason why all the other fetters actually exist in the mind. It's the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion that the mind has. People oftentimes use this word ignorance, but the Buddha wouldn't have used this word because this is a derogatory, degrading, and diminishing way to refer to somebody. And an enlightened being doesn't talk that way. So a better way to think about this is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom. The mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. The mind firmly believes in the unenlightened state that it's other people that are causing you to be angry and frustrated, where in reality it's your own mind. And that's because of the mind's lack of wisdom. The mind lacks wisdom of things like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. It doesn't even know these 10 fetters exist. There's all kinds of lack of wisdom that's in the mind. So the way you fix this is you cultivate wisdom. That's why you don't believe any of the teachings in the Buddha, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. So in order to get to enlightenment and awaken, you need to cultivate wisdom. That's what it means to awaken to enlightenment, is the cultivation of wisdom. And you do that through learning, examining, and investigating teachings, reflecting to verify if they're true or false, and then you practice them, integrating them into your day-to-day life. And slowly but surely, you awaken, you cultivate the wisdom of these natural laws, things like the natural law of karma. You need to awaken to this natural law. So this is the fetter of all fetters. This is the whole reason why all the other fetters exist and all this discontentedness exists. And that's why your ultimate goal in this life is to cultivate wisdom. So any questions on these fetters here? No questions? Okay. So now, once you understand the fetters a little bit, we'll talk about the 4 stages of enlightenment. Because as you're eliminating these fetters, your mind's moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment. They're referred to as stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. But nowadays, we just call them first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to them this way. And it actually helps you to understand them in this way because it has certain meaning for you. So I'm going to walk you through this to help you see what that is. So this first stage of enlightenment is called a stream enterer. And you will have eliminated the first 3 fetters of personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. When you've eliminated these 3 fetters, you're going to notice that your discontentedness has significantly reduced, that it's a mere fraction of what it once was. When you were off the path to enlightenment until you're in the first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness has significantly reduced. You still are getting discontent, but it's very minimal compared to what it was when you were off the path to enlightenment. In this stage of enlightenment, once you get to it, we refer to it as a stream enterer because it's just like a log enters the stream, that it's going to eventually get to the ocean. It's only a matter of time. The same thing is true that once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. You can't regress backwards from that point forward. Your mind is going to be in that first stage of enlightenment. And now if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you will come back into this world no more than 7 times so that you can have continued attempts to be able to get to enlightenment. But you don't start out as a stream enterer when you're born into the world, but you'll more readily make your way back to that first stage of enlightenment. So this first stage of enlightenment is key because you have a significant reduction of discontentedness and you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Then, if you've eliminated the first 3 fetters and you've thinned out number 4 and 5, you're in this second stage of enlightenment. Thinning out a fetter is like it's not as prominent, it's not as strong as it once was. If you can think back to maybe when you were a teenager, you might have had a lot of anger and hostility in your mind, where now maybe it's kind of diminished a bit. That doesn't mean you're in the second stage of enlightenment, but at least you understand what I mean by thinning out a fetter, is that it's not as prominent, it's not as strong as it once was. That's what it means to thin out number 4 and 5, sensual desire and ill will. We call this a once returner because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the world one more time and you will get to enlightenment in that next life. So this is the second stage of enlightenment. And once again, having accomplished this, you'll notice that your discontentedness has diminished even further from where you were in the first stage of enlightenment. Then there's the third stage of enlightenment. We call this a non-returner. You've eliminated the 5 lower fetters. And in this stage of enlightenment, you're very rarely experiencing discontentedness. It's like once every 2 months, once every 3 months. You're just getting a little annoyed, a little bit frustrated. And people around you probably don't even know that that's the case. It's just internal within your mind. In the third stage of enlightenment, other people can probably think that you're actually enlightened because you're quite cheerful, you're quite bright and uplifted. You just have a little bit of ickiness that's still in the mind. You have some residual craving and some residual clinging. So it's very insignificant and very infrequent when you're actually experiencing discontentedness in this stage of enlightenment. So you need to be dedicated and diligent because you can become complacent here because you're not really experiencing much discontentedness. We call this a non-returner because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you'll be reborn into the heavenly world and you'll experience enlightenment from there. But that's not the ideal existence. What you would like to do is get to this 4th stage of enlightenment. During the lifetime of the Buddha, it's called an arahant. This is where you're actually enlightened. The mind is no longer experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever. You've eliminated all the 10 fetters. The mind is completely purified. And if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will not be reborn in the cycle of rebirth. But what comes next, if anything at all, the Buddha leaves as an undeclared teaching. He doesn't say what does come next or what doesn't come next because his teachings aren't about an afterlife. His teachings are about learning and growing and developing in this life to be able to get to peace and joy. So you need to get to the point where you're not longing, yearning for something next. So he leaves it as an undeclared teaching intentionally so that your mind isn't longing, yearning to know what's next. Instead, get to peace and joy right now in this life. And if there is something next, great. It's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. But if there isn't something next after this life, okay, so be it. Your mind's peaceful and joyful in the present moment. So you would have purified all these 10 fetters out of the mind. And you'll notice for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, there's no discontentedness in the mind whatsoever. Not even the slightest ickiness. You wake up peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. Your mind's cheerful, bright, glad, and uplifted. All day long, you're experiencing that. And then when you're going to sleep at night, your mind's still experiencing that. So this is what we call an enlightened being. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would refer to this as an arahant, someone who's fully purified their mind. So any questions here on this? Yeah, if you could use the mic. We have people joining us online. That'll help them.
So that's the ultimate goal.
This Buddhism, is the goal.
To get there.
Yep.
But the only thing I read about that is that that's the end of the human population if we all get there.
True.
Yeah, we all. That's just the end of it all.
True.
Because we'll die out. Yeah.
Yeah, humanity is not permanent. Oftentimes people are clinging to humanity, thinking that somehow we have to stay on this earth.
I don't have that feeling, so this is fine for me.
Yeah, that's good. But a lot of times people do have that. But even if this didn't exist, humanity is still impermanent, right? We're going to come to an end because we arose, we change, and we fade away, right? It's only a matter of time. And how this occurs, how is it going to happen? If everybody got to enlightenment, this is how it's going to happen. But it could happen another way too, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be bad that way.
So. Yeah, it would be wonderful if it was this, right? Because we'd be living heaven on earth if everybody was enlightened. Because we'd all be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to each other. We'd be loving and kind. We'd be compassionate. We'd be willing to share with each other. We'd be generous with each other. There'd be no such thing as poverty. There wouldn't be famine because we would share our food. We would share our resources. It would be like heaven on earth. Right? We wouldn't be walking around with ego, looking down on people, judging other people, things like this. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now I'll share with you guys what is a Buddha, because this isn't a stage of enlightenment, but sometimes people will tell you that everybody is a Buddha, but this isn't actually true. A Buddha is very rare in the world. The last one that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So we haven't seen another Buddha in the world since that time frame that the world's currently aware of. But these are the criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. They will then preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. These are the three main criteria of what makes a Buddha. But then you'll notice that they have a deep, profound memory. Even in the unenlightened state, they can remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. This is how they actually get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides, that they accumulate wisdom over multiple lifetimes and they bring that together in order to be able to figure out how to get to enlightenment on their own. Where you, as an individual, you have a certain limited capacity in your mind. It's kind of like a hard drive that maybe you have 500 gigabytes. And that's why in the last 5 or 10 years, you can largely remember everything that you've been up to in the last 5 or 10 years. Where if you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories because you've had to delete old files in order to store new files because your mind reached a capacity. But an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they have an unlimited capacity to remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. And that's how they're actually able to get to enlightenment without the help of teachers or guides. Then an individual who's a Buddha can quickly determine the condition of someone's mind by spending time with them. They can observe these 10 fetters in another person's mind, and then they can offer them teachings to be able to help them to be able to transcend that and overcome that. But they would only do that with their students. They're not going to give unsolicited guidance to people. They're not just going to butt into somebody's conversation and be like, by the way, you're talking to your wife too harsh here. You should stop doing that. No, it's going to be solicited guidance from their students, but they can observe the quality of those students' minds and then help them. This is one of the ways that they're able to help so many people get to enlightenment. Then an individual who's a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, they're going to be practicing those same things as well, because a Buddha understands that they're teaching and their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So they're going to be functioning in the way that they actually teach so that their students can learn through their actions. We refer to this type of person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because by the time they get to enlightenment, they don't have any extra baggage in their mind. An individual who gets to enlightenment, the average person, they will still have a little bit of extra baggage. There might be like a certain meditation that their mind is still holding on to that didn't actually contribute to their enlightenment, but they're still actually doing that particular meditation. Where an individual who's a Buddha, if they try a certain meditation and it's not working to improve the condition of their mind, they will discard it because they don't have teachers or guides. Where a average student, they will retain that meditation out of respect for their teacher. Or if a Buddha tries a certain meditation and it works to improve the condition of their mind, they know that that leads to enlightenment. And now by the time they get to enlightenment, they fully understand the path and they illuminate that path for everybody else, making it very clear what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. So that's why we call them a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because they don't have this extra baggage in the mind. And this is very rare in the world. As I mentioned, the last one that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. You have a question? I think your mic's already on.
Yeah, my question is, what about Arahat monks? I thought they were in that kind of same, like Luang Pudu and other famous monks.
They're not Buddhas, but they may be an arahant. An arahant would be an individual who's purified their mind, but they've done that with the help of teachers and guides. They didn't do it on their own. Of course, they had to do the work themselves. Each individual person has to do the work, but they were guided by teachers. Where an individual who's a Buddha, they didn't have any teachers or guides to be able to figure out how to get to enlightenment. Okay. Now, one last thing to be able to help you guys understand what enlightenment is I'm going to teach you what enlightenment is not. This is one of my teaching styles, is I'll teach you what something is, and then I'll teach you what something is not, because that'll actually help you to understand what something is. Okay. So the way to know that your mind is not enlightened is if you experience conditioned feelings. What I mean by this is a feeling based on some condition. So here you see pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. It's very intuitive to understand that as an enlightened being, you're eliminating anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings. But sometimes when people see me say that you're going to eliminate happiness, they're like, hold on a second, David, I'm eliminating happiness and excitement to get to enlightenment. I don't think I'm interested in this. Well, what I'm talking about here is conditioned happiness or conditioned excitement, that in the unenlightened state, you can only be happy when certain conditions are met. For example, if it's sunny outside, you will be happy. Or if your mom does this, you'll be happy. If your bank account is this, if you have this kind of house, this kind of car, you have your boss does this, if you have these certain things, then you will be happy. So all these conditions add up, and your happiness is shrinking because it's conditional. That if my mom and dad do this, if my brothers and sisters do this, if I have this kind of house, this kind of car, if I have this much money in my bank account, if my boss does this, then I will be happy. That is conditional happiness. And the problem with that is when those conditions aren't met, you're angry or sad or frustrated. So if you get happy when it's sunny outside, that means when it's raining, you'll be sad or frustrated. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is get beyond conditional happiness, where you can get to unconditional happiness, where the mind is just always happy, right? And there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for that to occur. The mind is just cheerful and bright and glad and uplifted. So if you're experiencing conditional happiness, where you can only be happy if certain conditions are met, then your mind is not yet enlightened. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is beyond that. You're always happy, and there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for you to experience that. So that's what I mean here by eliminating these discontent feelings. You're eliminating conditioned feelings, that the mind is no longer basing its inner feelings on some condition, that your mind is just always bright, cheerful, glad, and uplifted. Then if you have a craving to tell other people that you are enlightened, then your mind is not yet enlightened. So if somebody pulls up to you at a retreat or some other place at a restaurant and says, like, by the way, don't tell anybody, but I'm enlightened, you know that they're not enlightened, right? Because an enlightened being isn't going around bragging. They're not boastful and arrogant. They're not going to put it on their Facebook page, right? They're not going to call home to mom. By the way, mom, aren't you so happy? I'm an arhat. I'm enlightened. Aren't you proud of me? This is the mind longing, yearning for something, right? The mind is looking for this acknowledgement and this validation. It's not content with itself. It wants to be boastful and arrogant to other people. So if you have a craving to tell other people that you're enlightened, you know that you're not yet enlightened. So as soon as somebody tells you that they are enlightened, you know that they're actually not. Then if you have complacency, where you have a lack of motivation, initiative, enthusiasm, a willingness to do something, if you're lacking initiative, then you know that your mind is not yet enlightened. Because what the unenlightened mind will do is it will tend to chase and chase and chase and chase and chase after things. And when you're not doing that, you'll tend to swing all the way to the other side, where you'll be dull and lethargic and lazy and complacent. Your mind's not in the middle, where you're gradually pursuing goals, objectives, or interests. So if you're noticing that your mind's complacent, then you're not yet enlightened. Your mind's not bright and cheerful and glad and uplifted and willing to do something. So this is how you know that your mind is not enlightened. Any questions on any of this? No questions? Okay. So it's now basically about 11 o'clock. And normally this is where we'll take our first break, but I actually just finished everything that we normally teach up to lunch, right? Usually when we come back from lunch, what I do is I teach Buddhist chanting. I'm not sure if you guys would like to learn Buddhist chanting or not. You can learn it as I'm chanting it in the mornings, but if you guys would like to have a session where I'm actually teaching you chanting, we can take a little break and then we can come back and I will teach you the Buddhist chanting, or we can just call it a day here and finish up our day. But it's up to you. I'll let you guys decide. So let me just see a show of hands. How many people would like to call it a day and be finished today at this point? Let me just see a show of hands. Okay, so you guys would like to just finish here. Okay, all right. What's that? Yeah, we just kind of consolidated it for you guys since it's a small group. There's not many people around Chiang Mai right now. There's plenty of people online who are joining us, but since there's not many people here, we'll just end here. But let me share this with you. As part of this course, I usually will meditate with you guys in the morning every day, and then we meditate in the afternoon. Since we're not having our afternoon session, I still encourage you to meditate on your own, whether it's at nighttime or in the middle of the day or whatever it is. If you can get 2 meditations in every single day this week, this will really help you to build up your practice. So we're probably going to do this. We're going to be kind of shrinking down the course on a couple of days here and there. Tomorrow, it's a full day, so there's a lot to learn tomorrow, so we probably won't shrink it down tomorrow. But when we do shrink it down on a couple of days, maybe today and Thursday, we might actually shrink it down. Just be sure you're still meditating in the afternoon, because that's really important for you. Okay, so thank you guys for being interested to learn the teachings of the Buddha, and I'll perhaps see you guys tomorrow. Okay, we're going to be studying the Eightfold Path. That's the core central teaching of the Buddha, and that's where things really get started to help you understand his teachings. So enjoy your day, and we'll see you next time. Okay.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.